Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm a little late. I'm sure that regular viewers will be shocked to hear that I had technical problems. Hopefully, you can hear me and see me, and the screen looks roughly full size. So, in our ongoing quest to try to show pictures on screen instead of me showing you my phone, which seems super lame, my husband thought he fixed what I broke last week, and then he broke something else. So, all of the screens were set very small. So it took us a while to figure out what we had undone. Even though I have learned now, like I start prepping everything like at least an hour before the show actually starts because technical problems. But anyway, I'm here now, and it looks like we've got Kira Nico and Geiler and of course Quindy. But also, if you watch Crow's Nest, the next time Michael complains that I get 2 hours and he only gets 1 hour, remind him that that is partly because I don't have a Justin I can say, can you show that photo, Justin, too? So I have to figure out how to do it on my own. There's Bob and Julie. All right, so it looks like the Kickstarter Pledge Manager is up. So you have to take the email address that you pledged with on Kickstarter, and then you go to the Reaper site and you put that in. And I think even if you were in previous Kickstarters, you make a new account. I'm not 100% sure. Honestly, I haven't done it yet, which you can tell because I'm being very vague. But what I do have are the paints. So I've been sitting on these since I got back from the Kickstarter party because I'm like, well, what's the point of showing people something they can't have yet? But you can have now. You can has paint. So I'm going to show that to you and swatch it out. Again, if you're a regular viewer, you will have experienced the wonder of swatches before. So let me switch over to my mixed view. That's just, I have my gray paper up, but I'll probably take that away. Before I start the swatching, I just have another piece of paper I don't need. Let me zoom out a little because we seem pretty zoomed in. So this is actually the swatches. This was done on a previous show. I'll zoom in so you can see the colors a little better. And I think there's a photo on my Facebook page. I'm going to try to put up photos again. I'll try and put them on the Reaper Facebook. Yeah. Well, maybe the Reaper Facebook. I'll mail these to John, and he can put them up on whatever Reaper socials that he wants. But I'll try to put them up on my Facebook artist page, and I don't know. That's probably it. I mean, maybe I'll throw it up on a blog page at some point since we have both. So I did technically already swatch the other ones when we were at the party. I swatched them out so we could show them on stream there. But these are just the dried swatches, and you can, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of a different experience, I think, if you see me actually using the paint, and then as I'm working with it, it will strike memories of or ideas for how you could use these colors. But if you want to see that process with these ones, that is a previous episode that I do not know which number. But if you go to Reaper's YouTube, there's a Beyond the Kit playlist. And one of those, it's not very long ago, is me swatching the color. So these are colors that already exist in the line. So you could go buy these now if you want to. But this is the set that they offer for a very good price through the Kickstarter. All the paints are, I think, about half price. And then these are the colors, and I'm just going to flip this over to the back, that are going to be the new additions. At least I hope my back flipping is going to work. And if you are not a regular viewer and you're like, what the heck is all this swatching business? If you go further back in that playlist, you will find several episodes on swatching where I talk about what kind of paper this is and why you would do swatches and how to do swatches. And if I've shown you my bottles of paint, well, that one doesn't have it because that's one of the new colors. So there's colors in my kind of Beyond the Kit that are new that I haven't done this with yet that I want to. But this is how I do it for my own purposes. You could cut these up, put them on a binder ring, put them in a binder. There's lots of different ways to use swatches and how to do swatches. But this is what I ended up finding worked the best for me. It gives me an indication of the color, the undertone, which I'll get into again when I start doing the actual swatches, and then since I've gone over there's some numbers there. Here it is on one that I haven't done it on. That gives me a quick opacity test too, which for miniature painting, sometimes we want a more opaque paint because we don't want to paint a bunch of base colors, and sometimes we want a paint that's a little less opaque, so it's better for glazing and, not getting those lines when you do your layers. I stopped putting the name on them because I prefer to do it digitally now. So I'll take this photo and put it into a program I have on my iPad that lets me add text to images, and that will be much nicer to read than my crappy handwriting. So everybody wins in that scenario. And then if John wants, he can divide it up a different way or put his own annotations in, or however he wants to do it for Reaper. I'll zoom in a little. Hopefully, I think I've got the things light enough that this isn't like a blindingly white piece of paper, but hopefully it looks like a white piece of paper. And I'll just get my paints out. So I don't know if anyone's already been playing around in the Pledge Manager, picking out some goodies that they might like to have or not. Just getting all my things. Now I'm trying to remember which brush I like to use for this. I use a bigger brush for this than I would for painting most things because I want to make the swatches a decent size. And yet have I lost this brush? Well, maybe I'll use an even bigger brush than usual. I'll use this one. So this brand, Reaper brushes only go up to, I think this is the largest round. The Reaper Cells is the 2. I'll try and get the bristle so you can see that is quite a bit smaller than this one. And this brand is Ebony Splendor, which I have found that I like quite a bit. I doubt that, the size 1, if they have one, I don't even know if they have size 1 or smaller. There's no artificial bristle brush that I've ever tried at our sizes that's going to work. So you can get ones that have decent points for watercolor paint sizes or for working on, big figures or terrain or whatever. But I have yet to find one that is going to work for doing detail work the same way that a Klinsky does. In fact, it would be fair to say I've stopped trying. Well, I mean, I do, if I see something that looks promising, I'll sometimes pick it up because I know that that's the dream, that for various reasons people want that. And often the really good artificial brushes aren't super cheap. So it's probably more cost effective to buy, one of those sets of a bunch of them on Amazon and burn through them than buy like this brand. I mean, this brand isn't crazy expensive, but buy that kind of brand. All right, I believe I missed some mockery of Michael, which I always endorse, because Krunigo points out that I also do a show every week. He has a real job, though. Let's see. Quindy added my Facebook art page to the bot message. He can't take away your crow's nest pokey tool if you already have it. I mean, I don't think he's going to come all the way to your house. Your house is not close to his house. And grab it. So, chat, the bot also just mentioned the in-person convention, which I would be surprised if none of you are aware of. But just in case. And I will... The other thing is, so I don't expect this to take the whole 2 hours. So I have these guys to work on to kind of set up for talking about some kind of improvement and ReaperCon entries type stuff. So this is like a dullish blue. It's a less saturated blue. If we look at the blue that I've been using the past few weeks on the Anurian Swordsman, or even, where is my Heather blue? Even Heather blue is a bit more blue than this. This would be a good highlight for Heather blue, maybe. And what I've liked this kind of color for is a non-metallic metal. So sometimes I would, if I really want like a blue steel look, I would use this as a major component. Other times I'm just going to glaze a little bit in on top of more gray steels. Faded clothing, this would be like if you want a faded blue jeans look, it's good for that. And that is the other thing that I forgot to mention. So I'm not sure if Ron's put it there yet, but if you're in the Pledge Manager for both of these sets of paints, I consulted other painters on how they use them as well as looking at what I use. And we wrote up little descriptions for here's a thing you could use it with. And then we also talked about, I'm just referring to the paints that are in the Kickstarter. You could use this one as a shade. You could use this one as a highlight, or you could use this paint to shade or highlight this other one. So it has lots of ideas for how to use these paints. So it probably has more ideas than I'm going to remember here, even though I just like proofread the second one and sent that to Ron fairly recently. Grunico says Scotland has a very robust anti-proctor policy. That is awesome, and I think you need to bring that up next Crow's Nest. And speaking of colors that kind of go together, so this is Barrow Gray, but it makes a good shade for that steely blue. I mean, other colors would too, but because this is the point of, not the point now, but one of the ways you could use this is also non-metallic metal related. So this would be a nice shadow color for non-metallic metal. And honestly, even real metallics, if you were painting a lighter color, silver or steel, and you didn't want to go full black, you wanted just a little hint of blue, this would be a nice color to do that with. Hey, Melander. In the event that anyone hasn't been watching the whole time that I've been doing the swatch things, so what I'm doing is I will start by laying out the color at full strength out of the bottle. So I'll do that now with lip pink. And I wonder if you can guess one of the functions of lip pink. So we've had colors in the past, and for whatever reason, they seem to end up on the chopping block. But I know it's nice to have a color that's kind of ready to go that works for medium and light normal human skin tones, for lips, for the parts we can't show here on Twitch. You could thin it down and add a little bit of a blush to the cheek, stuff like that. So we wanted a color like that. It's also nice. I mean, most of these colors are nice for clothing, because if you think about the clothing that people in non-industrial societies would wear, a lot of these are the kinds of colors that you could get with dyes that they had at the time, or that look a little faded because you've been working in the sun, or you're a skeleton that's been moldering in a dungeon for a while, or that kind of thing. Quindy says that the descriptions are there for the painter's picks, and Ron will be adding the descriptions for the, I think it's just called Kickstarter set, right? Like, I don't think it has a fancy name. Trash Ron says the bits we can't show on Twitch, toes. Well, I don't think toes are particularly pink, but ears are actually often very pink. If you look at someone's ears in comparison to, the skin on their forehead or their hands or something, well, some people get red hands too, but you will notice that a lot of ears can be pink. And Michael mentioned that this is a kind of color that he would like for doing the ears of monsters as well, because sometimes you can add a little variety to something that's kind of the same color all over by doing something like you make the ears pink while the fur is gray or whatever. Quindy says that new MSP colors is what they call the Kickstarter set that is new, that I am swatching right now in the Pledge Manager. And then, so this is more for natural human skin tones, but for those less naturally skin toned people, we have Drow Blush. And this is the kind of color I would also use on, like, Succubi or Leathery Wing. This would be a nice color for Leathery Wings of a creature that is otherwise, natural human color. And it may seem weird, but this is a color that I would use in the shadows of some natural human skin tones. So you wouldn't want it where it's like a main part. So I wouldn't be doing it like here, but just right there, or like under the chin, those kind of places. Purple works really well as a shadow color on most natural, again, this would be medium to light, not dark skin. We talked about dark skin in a previous episode. If you're new here, that will also be on YouTube. And I have an article on my blog about tips for painting darker skin tones, and then also tips for shading on light skin tones, because we're very reluctant to do that. And this is the kind of color that might work better than you think on a very light skin tone. Like, you would mix it in to mix your wash or your initial levels of shade. But of course, Trash says, I think that flesh color would be a good base tone to build up rosy skin tones. Yes, if you wanted a reddier person, and you're right, we don't have a lot of medium to darker reddish colors for skin, I think. We have a few, but we don't have a lot. So this is Sturge Brown, because the one color we can't ever have enough of, really, it's brown. I mean, how many things in life and in the dungeon and in the plains and in the wherever else we send our adventurers, how many of those things are brown? And the answer is many, many. So I always welcome a brown. And this one, I have to double check now, because there's a brown that's a little bit green, and then there's a brown that's not. And this looks like the greeny one, because I don't think we wanted owlbears to look green. That's sour. So you can use this for shading kind of unhealthy looking plants. So you're not using, this green. But when you're using a dull green or a khaki color, we've got a lot of great khaki colors, and we've got some highlights for those khaki colors. We don't have a lot of shadows for them. So one use for this is shading khaki colors, khaki green colors, but also khaki brown colors. So tans and, I don't know that there's another word than khaki green. I think like uniform brown is one of them. Colors like that. This is a color that you could try shading them with, and it's going to give you a slightly different effect than just a brown. Veil Under the Red, I've been using the Redstone Triad to build up shadows for my rosy skin. Well, see, the problem is that some parts of the Redstone Triad were canceled. So we were looking for alternatives for some things. So I think Redstone itself is still produced, but I'm going to save that one. I'm not sure that... I'm going to save that one too. I'm going to do this one. Green Griffin, very thematically named. Painters picked these, but we did not name them, because Ron is good at naming things. I am spectacularly bad at naming things, so I never like when people ask me to name things. And that's kind of... In previous Kickstarters, I did not have a set of paints before the Pledge Manager was open, or even while the Pledge Manager was open. I would occasionally get samples of one or two things. If we happen to be at Reaper while paints were being mixed, we might get a few of those bottles. But for this Kickstarter, we call it the Painter's Picks, because some of us painters got together. It was mainly Michael, Jen Greenwald, and myself. But I've also, for years now, been keeping... I have a little file on my phone, even, so I can do it anywhere. When I hear people say stuff in chat or on the forums or talking to me live at cons, like, oh, I really miss such and such a color. I try to make a note of that, particularly if multiple people are saying it, because sometimes we get asked if we have all three of them. Are you sure? I thought plain redstone was still there. So if you do a web store search, it doesn't come up. Well, alrighty then. I guess I'm glad we went in for some pinks here. So these colors, we picked out the Painter's Picks colors, which was actually kind of tougher than you would think, because we wanted it to be colors we really use. So that was, we're not trying to shine you on about that. We don't all use all of these colors equally. Each of us had, a few that we might be more excited about or less excited about. I don't paint a lot of metallics, so obviously these are Michael's choices. And he paints with both of these a lot. One of old pewter and old bronze, I think. I should have written down the names, but they're out there somewhere. So we got to pick these, which was fun. But then Ron, I guess, was feeling generous, and he consulted us about what we would like for paints. And we got to, talk with the ladies that make the paint at the Kickstarter and kind of give a descriptions, or we'd make some mixes and say, we don't care really what colors you use to get there, but this is kind of the color we're looking for, because they would probably use different pigments than if you were just grabbing bottles. Creenico 589. I think I'm the only person apart from Anne that Mrs. Griffin Tan. I bought 5 bottles when it got canceled. I liked Griffin Tan too. I don't know if Trash just said I'll unofficially name them crap Proctor wanted. I don't think they're crap. I just don't use metallic so much. But Proctor and I were both very pleased with ourselves coming up with this one, the Griffin Green, and this one too, the Drow. I mean, we like all of them. Some of them were kind of, well, we need this. I don't know why the spam people always call me when I'm on stream. And some of them were us getting a little more like, if I could go wild in the pigment factory, what would I do? All right, so let's look at Requiem Red, which I definitely didn't name because it's super hard to say for me. I don't know if it's hard for everyone. I don't know if Ron tests that before he writes things down. So this is one that I wanted. We have had in the past a dark red, red liner for a while, and then we had red shadow, I want to say. And I use it a lot. Like, this is one of those colors that, I mean, if you are a regular, you've heard me talk about how mixing shadows with black is probably not the greatest plan with most colors. And this is a color that is great for mixing shadows with, on a surprising range of colors. I can test that out a little bit after we finish all the swatches if people are interested. So it's like kind of, it's not quite red and it's not quite purple, but it's just cool. I just like it. Maybe the spam people are watching this stream. I really, really doubt that. Chris, did you ever tell me where Hawk Turquoise came from? Because I don't think that was an MSP. So was that like an original pro paint? Or it's somebody else's paint? I do not know if they still have... It's the old GW line. We'll see. Reaper could never copy exactly another company's paint. That they would have to tweak it, probably. In some way or another, especially that particular company that's a little contentious at times. How does that compare to the 9001 red color triad with brick red, etc.? I could try to get brick red. It's really not close at all. Brick red is a bit redder, I think, and I don't think it's quite as dark. So none of the paints that are called red. There are a few dark reds in the line. None of them are quite this dark. I think maybe you have to add the purple to get down that dark. I don't know. Not that, I mean, I think red brick has just a little hint of purple too, because I do like that color also. People are wondering if the spam people had a question about new paints. If only spam calls would be that interesting, I might actually answer my phone. Do you guys still answer your phones? I gave up. I don't even answer the door anymore unless I'm expecting someone or I look out and I recognize who it is, because I'm just so tired of people trying to sell you stuff and making you be rude to make it stop happening. Like, I don't want to have to slam the door in your face or, just cut you off on the telephone, but they just won't stop. So I'm like, fine, then you just don't get to talk to me at all, because it stresses me out to be rude like that. But it also stresses me out to have people trying to convince me to buy something all day long. So it's like, the door stuff is, the phone stuff, obviously, a lot of that is a scam. But a lot of the door stuff is a scam too. So I did not talk about this color. This is Hakir Gold, which is thematically named for the Egyptian theme type stuff that we had in the In the Kickstarter, I believe Hakir is the kind of sort of Egyptian place in the Reaper world of Adon. And this is also a nice color for non-metallic metal, this time obviously gold. Not that you can't use it for other things. I mean, this is, if you're struggling with painting a brighter yellow, paint something like this as a first coat and then go to your brighter yellow. Or mix a little bit of this in, because this is going to be more opaque than a true yellow. Like a really bright. This is, I didn't do the swatching, but I don't need to do the swatching to tell you that this is not a super opaque color. Did I swatch this one? No, because it's gold. It's not even yellow. There, I swatched this one. So you can see that because I do full strength swipe down there, that is not a very opaque color. But if I painted some of this, and then I would have to paint fewer coats of this over it. It's a nice highlight for a lot of browns. If you want kind of a yellowy tan type of brown leather, this would be a nice option, or to highlight a brown or leather. I mean, it falls under the you can't have enough browns category. It's just the yellowy one of those. Trash says this reads on camera for a gold NMM color. And it definitely is. This is a great gold NMM color. Valander, what I am already about to miss is the original remarkably opaque bright red Hollyberry, since the new version is a dark red that is pretty redundant. I don't think I noticed Hollyberry changing, and I do usually notice slight variations in. I mean, I have a few paints where when I got a new copy, I'm like, oh, that looks different than the old one. So I have like 2 of the same one, and it's mostly like the zombie ghoul. There's like a set of green colors for painting your zombies and whatnot. And there were 2 of those that I think the color changed, and 1 skin tone. The original rosy skin was actually a little bit different. But I have not noticed that Hollyberry changed. Maybe I didn't have the original Hollyberry. I don't know. Quindia only answers work phone, and half of that is spam calls as well. I put them on hold until they hang up. I worked in a game store at the mall for a while, and every once in a while we would actually get like a door-to-door salesman at the mall or something trying to sell us, and it's like, dude, I'm the cashier. I do not have the authority to make whatever decision it is you're trying to make happen here. And also, I don't want to, so please go away. Or they call a lot to offer dental services. And it happened that the guy who owned the store, his wife was a dentist, so anyone who wanted dentistry already had an option. So this is Brutal Purple, which again is the kind of color that it may seem surprising, but I like to use in the shadows of natural human skin tones. It may be reading a little darker on camera than it is. I mean, it's not super light, but I'm not sure if it's reading a little darker than it actually is. Also a great clothing color, non-human color. I mean, non-human skin tone colors. That'd be a pretty nice color for a Hellborn, aka Tiefling. I mean, I love purple, so what can't you do with purple, really? This is like going from an opaque magnum red to a clotted red. It's a big difference. Well, if I go down into my basement of paint, I'll try to see if I have an older copy. It may be that I never had the original Hollyberry, because I don't think I got all the Christmas paints originally. I think I've only been getting them the past few years. So this is Owlbear Brown, because there are owlbears in the Kickstarter, and you're going to need to paint them something, right? Trash says we need a blurple. And actually, I agree that we do not have enough blue violets. But this may be an area where I am alone in the opinion. I don't know. We do have some, but we don't have enough. So, not that you are consigned to painting your owlbears this color, but if you want brown owlbears, this is a good color for it. And then you can see that the Hakir Gold would highlight that up pretty nicely. So that was the other, I think Michael was saying feathers and fur. That's a good color for feathers and fur. This is all written down though, so you can go in the pledge manager. And I don't know, maybe I'll ask Ron and see if he cares if I also post it somewhere else. This is Fresh Brick. This kind of falls under the why do these colors keep getting canceled? I don't understand. So we years ago had a set of brick reds, the triad. I do not remember the names. I have them over there, but I don't remember the names. I think it was like, no, I wouldn't call something antique brick. Because that would be weird. Old brick, probably. I don't know. And then that got canceled. And then we had the Redstone Triad. And as Quindy has just confirmed to us, that got canceled. But my question is, what is everybody painting their bricks and terracotta and all of those things? Because even if you don't care about this for the other uses that I would suggest, which again is that's if you're the color of your person's skin color is a little too dark for this to work as a lipstick color or lip color, this color would work great. Also work for just shading skin, because I for years I used redstone or redstone shadow to shade Caucasian type skin tones, and I thought it worked really well. It was just that nice kind of not too saturated so that the shadows were jumping out, add a little bit of life color, because people are a little red sometimes. But then alas. Yes, Vanlander's mentioning Show Anti Sienna. I'm not sure if that's the correct name. It's one of the Pathfinder paints, and I believe that's something in the Pathfinder world. But it is a kind of reddish, pinkish, darker skin color that is great for shading. I mean, it's great as a skin color on its own, but sometimes shading lighter skin tones is just really tricky because it'll just look weird. It'll just like the shadows stand out too much or something. So those colors, when we find them, are good. So this is Boggy Green, which I would say some of the purposes are the same as I was talking about with the Sturge Brown, where you're shading like khaki browns and stuff like that, using it on like swamp vegetation, sickly, dying type things. You could thin this down and put a little bit in the shadows of someone's skin who's unwell or undead. I like to do that with undead, so they might be like primarily, sort of blue or sort of green or whatever, sort of purple, but then I'll put some other colors. I'll take, a color like this and put a little bit in the shadows to suggest like pooled blood. Or if it's, less of a greeny one, I'll take a color like this and put a little bit of that in the shadows. So those are the Kickstarter colors, and this camera is not as exact about color as I would prefer. Bye, Bob and Julie. Talk to you later. So I will attempt to take a picture and then color correct it and post it on my Facebook page and send it to Reaper to use as they so wish. I assume there are pictures in the Pledge Manager, so maybe they put the pictures from the other one in there. I don't know. We will look at these again once they dry because, you can already see, compare how shiny the other ones are, there's rarely a huge, they call it drying shift, when a color looks different wet than it looks dry. But there's always the thing where when something's shiny and wet, it looks a little bit darker than it actually is. But what I have to do is put this somewhere safe for that. I have my new shelf. I'll put it down there. And one of you remind me if I don't remember. So those are the new Kickstarter colors. And I do feel bad that I have them before everyone else. But at least I get to show you what they look like. Oh, and I can show you one more thing related to that. I'll have to zoom in a little. Because while I was at the Reaper party, I painted this little guy only using colors in the Kickstarter. So this includes the painter's picks, but also the ones that I just showed you. So you can see, like, there's some of that brutal purple in the shadows. I used mold yellow for mixing some of the highlights. This is why the contrast is a little weird in some respects, or the color palette, I don't know how you want to put it. when we selected the colors, it wasn't with the idea that if you bought these 24 colors, these are all the paints you would ever need. We selected them as like cool colors we like to use or that fill holes that are in the line or stuff like that. But I thought it would be an interesting challenge. And his green outfit is shaded with that Requiem Red. And so is the darker areas of the feathers. And that may seem weird, but if you remember, green and red are color complements, so you actually can get pretty good traction going either way, you know, shading a red color with green or shading a green color with a red. Trash would like to see the last color thinned out and washed on a model. I don't think I have a test victim handy. I could do this then. That was the Boggy Green, right? Hopefully it's not gonna... I've just got a little blister. I keep my blister packs because of stuff like this. And especially when, if you have kids that you're trying to teach paint or you do anything at like the game store or convention or something, these are really nice to keep for wash cups because usually whatever we use for... I did make a mistake. I have to do that again. I'm trying to put it on plastic, so I'm going to have to thin it with brush on sealer, not water. So we will thin it again. But anyway, keep your blister packs. There's actually about 12 different things I use them for. I'm not sure it's that many, but you can cut little pieces out if you need broken glass. So you got to shape brush on sealer a lot, and I didn't think to do that before I started. But yeah, if you've ever taken a class with me at ReaperCon or Gen Con or whatever that you had to mix a wash in, I probably gave you one of these so you wouldn't have to gum up your palette. So let's try it on the ridges of this. I'm going to take the light down just a little because that looks like it's glaring out. Try on the ridges of here, it should kind of essentially act as a wash. With tons and tons of bubbles. So we will also let that dry. Several of the colors in this set are good wash colors, I think. Because you got the Boggy Green, I've got the... Do I remember what they were called? I mean, the Requiem Red, Barrow Gray. The Barrow Gray is going to be a great wash color as well. Trash may or may not need to paint a zombie horde. Well, that looks like a pretty not feeling very well zombie to me. So yeah, this little guy who I believe you can definitely still buy this from Reaper. I do not know 100% if some of the purchase money is still going to charity. When they do that, they usually only do it for a certain length of time. My understanding is that over $21,000 have been donated, which is pretty awesome. And then I just need to fix that little chip, put him away. All right. Perhaps I will pause briefly and show you other things. So this is the Mini of the Month. Lars Ragnarsson. Chris said they would use that green color on Kroot. So this is the figure if you spend $40 US or equivalent currency, maybe not in Australia, I don't know. Honestly, I don't keep up with any of that stuff. But if you spend enough, you get a free Bones USA copy of it. This one is metal because they actually made this while I was at the Kickstarter party. So it was like I got it like the day before I left or the day I left. It was they got enough to give a painter one to take home and finish. So with this guy, I wanted to work on textures a lot because I was getting some comments that, do I ever paint anything that isn't super smooth and stuff? And I was like, well, I think I do, but all right, I'll do it right now just to see. So I was experimenting with the leather, and my current blog article is about how I painted the leather, and I took step-by-step pictures. So I took big close-up step-by-step pictures and explained my process, showed the colors that I used. That was that. So these are the colors that I used to paint that. Not the green. The green is kilt or whatever we call that. So I did this was the starting point color. I layered up with these, and then all of these colors were applied as glazes in specific places to both create depth and integrate the texture so he didn't look like Rictus the Undying. So because he is the pre-Rictus version, as Valander says. This is 100% Abrahams' granddad. Yeah, he did not miss Ab Day ever. There was only Ab Day. Although his legs, I mean, if you look at the muscles on those, he's a muscular man. He may not be as young as he used to be, but he's a muscular man. And I was even trying to paint the non-metallic metal with a bit streakier of a look, because I do paint very stylized, super smooth metal, and that's not really what metal looks like, but that is what I've come to do, so that is usually what I do. And then I was also exploring some color theory stuff with this guy that I want to try to write about, which it's sort of like the experiment of this guy that is the previous article that's on my blog that many of you were here for, talking about how to steal a color scheme. And if you'll recall from the videos, or if you've read the article, I talked about how at a certain point I didn't care if I was matching the colors from my inspiration exactly. I cared about whether they worked together. And a similar kind of thing happened with Lars. So I was trying for, a particular tetrad off the color wheel. When I go back and check my work to figure out what the colors were, I don't know if I did it. But in the end, the question was, do the colors work together? And I'm happy enough that they do. There were two things that I changed, where if you go look at that article, you will see one of them is the horns, because I was demonstrating something on the helmet, and it happened that the before picture was my first attempt at the horns, and the after picture was my second attempt, and I'm going to try to explain that more in the other article. But then this was originally much bluer. Actually, I used the Steely Blue, which is a kind of color that I like for non-metallic metal. It just seemed too blue when I put it on this figure. Like, it was like I would walk by and the sword almost, or the axe almost looked like it had to be magical, or it was just drawing too much attention because, all the blues over here. Even now, it's a little blue. But what I ended up doing instead was, I think it's just this, and I mixed it with white. So to make, there's still like a hint of blue, but I wanted it to be a little grayer. And then there's some of the greens and stuff are glazed on because I wanted it to be a little more teal than it was. In fact, the color scheme that I picked, it should have been more teal. But I've been trying that digitally, and I don't think I like that either. So I think this is more what I wanted. Anyway, I don't even know if you can see the textures on his armor on this camera, but there are some pictures online. You want to see that. And then if you want to review the colors I used for that or how I got there. Valander says, my Baron Black Tree, or Baron? I've always said Baron Black Tree, but then he sounds like a Baron, so maybe it is Baron, as my ultimate goal for non-metallic metal on an adventurer. And if you're interested in that figure and more about how I painted it, then you want to go to Reaper's site and look for the Dungeon Dwellers page, and there are links to paint guides from numerous different painters. So over that year when they did the mini of the month, everyone who painted one was asked to also share some information about how we painted it and do these little write-ups. And those are on Reaper's site. I think I have I don't want to say deep cuts, additional information, extended version on my blog. If you search for Baron Black Tree, you'll get the link to the Reaper thing, and you will also get some additional information that is, Rhonda's always having to cut me down. My problem in school was never the minimum essay count, word count on the essays. It was not going over the max. I mean, not always, but a lot of the time my problem is not going over the maximum word count because I will talk too much. So and I have a picture of this guy because you know how I feel about the camera. So let's try images. The thing that breaks everything. So there's the back, and you can see it's actually not as super smooth as I might normally go for. And if you look at the article, there's kind of the three big folds on his cloak sort of show three different approaches or stages in the blending process, and then that's in the video. And the article links to all the videos where I painted this guy. So this is probably the miniature I've done on stream where I painted the most from, start to finish, and it was including figuring out the color scheme and making mixes and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're someone who does wonder about my sort of overall process, this is the miniature that has demonstrated that so far, and that article will help you find all the videos that are related. And the painting of the cloak is in the same videos where I talked about how I did the color scheme. So that's the back. Let me find my little mouse pointer, and you can look at his front. So I don't know how different the colors look, but that is the actual color of, oh golly, now I'm Elanter the Lost Prince, which you all decided he was lost because he was too proud to ask for directions. So what else is in my image file? So this is I guess I painted most of this on stream too. But it's not, if you're more interested in painting character types, you're not getting information about skin or whatever from this very delightful bird person. So this is the figure that Reaper is selling for charity, but this is being raffled off for charity. So if you're interested in this figure, I will show the address in a minute. You can go buy raffle tickets to try to win this and a bunch of other stuff, but only for the next 2 days, because I think the raffle ticket sales end on June 15th. I do not know the time. Let's assume midnight in some part of the United States. So this is, maybe you can see the textures a little better here on Lars. And then I think the axe texture, you probably can see less in the photo than you can see on the camera, weirdly enough. And then if you do want to buy a raffle ticket to try to win my copy that I painted of Kobzar Soloveitko, you would actually win all of this. So you would win all the paints you saw me use on the stream, and probably a few that I used when I was fiddling with things after the stream to try to make it nice enough to put into a raffle. A blister pack that's signed by Jason Wiebe, the sculptor, and an hour of my time in a video conference or email or whatever you prefer to advise you about things. But let's say you do not like Kobzar because you could never use them in a game. That is fine, because look at all these other fabulous prizes that you could choose to enter the raffle for instead. So you just buy tickets for the things that you want. You aren't buying a ticket to an overall raffle and winning stuff you don't care about. So in the lower center, that is a 2D painting that Aaron painted, Corporea. Everybody knows Corporea, I think. So this was like the dioramas and busts and special category, I think. So then there are also large models and vehicles. So if your main interest in figures is gaming, particularly GW gaming, this raffle has you set up, because they have lots of cool things that you could put in your army. And there's singles, also primarily GW, but not exclusively. There's a Marvel Crisis figure in there. Probably some other stuff that I can't see because my camera is very small. Why is this not going forward? There we go. That's more of the single figures. Then there's squads. So there are a few squads. And forces, do I know what the difference between a force and a squad is? No, I do not. I'm sure if you go to the webpage, it will explain. And then this is kind of the big prize, which unfortunately, because of the way my picture setup is, you can't see that well. But it's all of the parts of this game. Do I remember what it's called? Marvel United. It's the Marvel board game where the figures are in a chibi style. And 54 of those figures, 54, have been painted by super amazing painters. Oh, I thought I grabbed the group shot of the just the painted figures. But you also get like all the expansions and stuff. So it's really, I mean, I'm going in for this one for my husband. That's what I'm spending most of my tickets on. I think there was a Make Love Not War bust with a man and a woman that I was also interested in. So this is where you go, and the proceeds from the raffle are being donated to charities to aid people in Ukraine. Valander is fanboying over Paul Boner stuff, especially the orcs and the goblins. Trash was showing Aldi some of the Nova raffle stuff over the weekend. He was like, why can't they just auction them? They may actually get more with a raffle because, you know, you go over X amount, a lot of us are going to tap out on an auction. So if you don't get a big spender, it doesn't do that well. But I don't know, that's always a hard call. I'm talking to someone local. They're trying to do a little charity for raising money for doing Dungeons and Dragons clubs and stuff in schools. And they're doing an auction, and he was asking, I mean, I run a local Facebook group for local miniature painters, and he came on there asking if anybody interested in entering the contest. There would be an entry fee, blah, blah. Anyway, it's always tough to figure out how to do it for a charity. The other local charity I work with, they do the tickets thing. So you buy tickets, and they have little Tupperwares, and all the prizes are out, and you put the tickets in whatever thing you actually want to win. And I mean, it is interesting to see that sometimes things there won't be a ton of interest, and other things will be like, there'll be a crazy amount of tickets. All right, so this is my new palette again that I think definitely needs more water. But so this is the same paper from last week. I did go test there. You can just rinse it off, and I think you can just barely see a little bit of blue in that corner. You probably can't even barely see it. Yeah, there's just a couple of, those aren't hairs, that's a little bit of blue paint that's left over. So they don't lie about the reusability of the hydration membrane. Apologies, Wendy. But whether it actually stays wet enough, I am still undecided. Wet enough for me, at least. Undecided about. And I have not tested this since last week. I've been doing various things that are not painting miniatures. In fact, it's been long enough that I'm kind of getting itchy to get back to the painting of the miniatures. I'm not sure why I took that gray paper away, because we all know the camera prefers the gray paper. So what am I going to do now? My remaining hour. So if any of you went to Reaper Virtual Expo, you may have gone to my class, which was about scales and feathers, I want to say. Maybe it was just scales. I feel like it was scales and feathers. And I painted one of these guys. And because I was doing the cooking show thing where it was like, okay, and now here's what he looks like with the wash done. So we didn't have to wait too long during the show. I have a bunch of these, and these ones are at the wash is finished stage, but nothing else. And I threw a little more paint on them before the show for various reasons. But I would like to do these two up in the same way, kind of the usual way a lot of people would paint them, you know, with dry brushing and washing and stuff like that. And then take one of them and do the thing where I'm like, okay, well, if this was in the Reaper MSP Open, here's what I might say is something you could work on, and then I will work on it, and we'll have a before and after that's not just photos, it'll be a live in-person before and after. Well, live on video, but also I would bring them to ReaperCon and put them on my desk. So I had to go look up my colors that I used for the class, but I did manage to find them all. I couldn't find one of them for a minute. Hold on, everything's falling over now. All right, so the base color of these figures, which you can just kind of see on the base rim, because I was doing so many to do the cooking show thing, I ended up airbrushing the original coat of color on the scales. with Numeneria Rust, which is a Pathfinder color. So that's like the color it started. And then the wash color is new. So it doesn't have the swatch thing going on. But it's Ready Leather, which is an excellent color. So now I'm going to start dry brushing some scales, and for the fun of it, I was going to do them all in with the same brush, but I thought, well, why not? This is going to be the full scale test that I did on some other shows where I was testing like the 5 or 6 different kinds of brushes, but we can test 2 different kinds of brushes. So we can use one of the, purpose-made dry brushes, and you can kind of get similar things from makeup brushes. This is and Elf is a really inexpensive brand in the US. So you can look for something similar from the makeup counter to see if you, makeup counter, I mean, I'm talking go to Walgreens or Target or something. It's this dome shape, and the fairly short bristles is kind of what you're looking for these brushes. And bigger sizes can be cool too. I mean, some of the tests I did were with brushes like this size. But if you paint terrain or vehicles, you could paint stuff up so fast with these. So fast. Much better than the traditional. Where did it go? Well, this is not a true flat. This is a filbert, but this is probably what I will use. Since this, there's a decent amount of real estate on these guys. I don't need a tiny little fiddly brush. And I think I do have a pure flat of that. And yet, I feel like I want to use the filbert. Oh. Do I use the flat? The flat doesn't look very beat up yet, is my... Do I want to subject it to the fun that is dry brushing? And then if you get a whole set of makeup brushes, you may or may not get that exact kind, but you get other ones. This is probably just a little too big. But that one would be fine, I bet. But I'm going to use... This is a brand that I think... American Painter, I think you can get it at Joann's. And I feel like... I don't know if he's still using this. He's probably using something even less expensive. But I think James Wapple. I might have these brushes because of James Wapple. Yeah. But my Reaper flat, the largest flat they make is size 4. And mine is a little beat up. Now, it used to be a lot beat up. This is still usable, but for this particular purpose, I think those hairs that are sticking out are more likely to go in the little scales. So I don't want to use that. I will use this filbert. And I've never used this makeup brush before. So I'm going to go with the... So I actually have 2 of these, and there's a third company you can buy them from. So Army Painter makes a set of 3. And this is the small and the medium. And then Rosemary and Company makes 5 different sizes, and they even have one that goes really small, which is useful because you'll find that there's places where you can get most things, and then there's just like a few little crevices or whatever, or like a more delicate area. So I'm gonna go with the kind of medium, smaller medium. Those are fairly equivalent brushes, I believe. Oh, that's right. I didn't even think about that. Quindy is correct and put a link to my Reaper Virtual Expo class because it was recorded. So it's on Reaper's YouTube channel. Now, that was many technological things ago. So the sound is terrible and the picture is not amazing. So just mentally prepare for that if you want to do it. If you want to look at that video, it's not going to be whatever flaws you think I have now. This one has more. Kurniko says the Rosemary and Company ones are great. You've tried like this style or just Rosemary and Company in general brushes, which I mean they're a very quality brush making company. But then Artist Opus is the company that kind of brought this to the miniature market first. but their full set is a little spendy. Particularly, well, I mean, Rosemary Company, I ordered those from England too, so I'd be ordering Artist Opus stuff from England. But if you wanted a full set of 5 that Artist Opus has that I suspect are very similar to these sizes, you could also get like they have a bigger one too, a nice wooden case and a special moistening thing, which I had something kind of like that, but I think it fell off my desk, so I will not have that today. I'll just use my regular sponge. So as I say, this is actually not going to be like how I painted it in the class in a way. If you were in the class, some of what I did there is what I want to do on the Here's How to Do It Better version. So I kind of want to do them more the way people are likely to do it, but it's something they could improve on, I guess. Maybe is how I will put that. I'm trying to figure out how to remember which is which. All right, the one that has paint on it is going to be the round style brush. Let's see. Even more, will it focus? So the thing about these is when you put it in your paint, they're going to suck up like way more paint than you think is reasonable. You're going to be like, oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to afford to use these. I'm going to go through so much paint. But you don't have to reload as often. So because they're people in the brush world tend to call that a thirsty brush. It's good to start off with a lighter hand, and then as you notice the brush start running out of paint or having less paint, then you can start using firmer pressure. And learning to handle brushes with different pressure, regardless of what type of painting you're doing, whether you're doing, fancy display painting or get it on the table quick as possible painting, learning to use different pressure for different tasks is a very useful skill. And maybe how people are doing some of the stuff that you feel like you can't do. It may just be a question of using a lighter pressure. And you notice I'm way back here on this brush. I'm not all crunched up. This is not a super detailed project. When I start painting these tiny little bands of his leather that are holding on his shoulder guard, yeah, I'm gonna scrunch up on that brush. But for right now, I can get kind of a freer stroke, cover a bit larger area, pulling back. So that is something else to experiment with. In miniature painting, it is very rare that we aren't choked up on the ferrule. We're doing detail stuff. But if you're a traditional artist or you've taken traditional art classes, you may have been yelled at by a teacher to use your whole arm or draw from your elbow or any of that kind of stuff. This is as close as we get. Painting from the upper knuckle instead of the lower knuckle, I guess. Behold the looseness and freedom. I will have to every grit once in a while, and probably that is approaching soon, rinse this brush off. Since not all of the paint gets out, there's paint on there drying, getting crusty critters. And that's partly where that dusty look from dry brushing comes from. I think if you are using like a really, really super dry brush, if you wear this and you do it, you can see the dust coming off of it. And I think that's one of the secrets of these brushes. You don't have to make them so dry that literal dust is coming off for them to work. It's interesting, during the class, or I can't remember if it was after, because we had like little Discord areas where people could come and ask us questions. Somebody asked me, well, what color would you paint the skin? Because if you look at his, the back of his arms have sculpted scales, but the front doesn't as much and his hands don't and stuff. And I'm like, well, partly for the sake of simplicity, but also just because it feels more correct to me, I would just paint it the same color. Excuse this water for a moment. And then there ended up being kind of a discussion about, like, is there anything under a snake's scales? And I believe someone who is knowledgeable about snakes said there is not. Like, that is their skin. So it would make sense to paint it the same color you paint the scales. Because what my theory would be is that there are scales there. They're just so fine in texture, we're not seeing them at this scale. Kuriko uses these brushes from Rosemary and the Red Dot Synthetics. I'm a lot closer than you to the factory. I can get next day delivery. Are you close enough to ever, like, actually go? I mean, do they do tours? Because that would be pretty cool, I bet. But yeah, I haven't, I mean, there was Brexit, and I have no idea how much that changed things. But prior to Brexit, I ordered from the UK, and I had a client in the UK for several years. And so I was buying things and getting things, and I never had any issues. The speed was often much quicker than I would have imagined. I mean, obviously this was pre-fun supply chain times. But that was not a country I ever had any qualms about ordering from. I know some people don't like to order from away because they're worried about, stuff not coming, or post office doing something weird or whatever. But I never had a problem with England. And these ones didn't come as fast as I've had stuff in the past from England, but we are in the land of supply chain problems now. I had to order my Winsor and Newton brushes from Jackson's, which is also in the UK. Dick Blick got them in eventually. But I started getting worried because you guys were all saying stuff about how you can't import sable brushes right now or something. But the big stores in the US did get them in eventually, but I got panicky, so I was like, you know what, I'll just leave my orders there, and I'll make this Jackson order, and then I'll have backup brushes for my backup brushes. And in fact, I think I've only broken into one of those brushes because my zero was acting funky. Kuriko is going to look into tours. She goes to Yorkshire. I mean, they probably wouldn't let you watch people make brushes because I'm sure that would be stressful for the brush making people. A lot of the oil painters that I follow, even some watercolor painters, they love Rosemary brushes, and some of them even have, like, Rosemary will do a thing with them where they're like, okay, so tell us your favorite 6 or 10 or whatever brushes, and they turn it into a kit, and then you can just order. I want Sadie Valeri's brush kit. So that is with the just putting the original base color back, and that's what it looks like after the fancy purpose made dry brush, which let me rinse that off a little so paint doesn't get caked in there. Dark Sword still isn't shipping to the UK. Really? Wow. What about his European person? Because isn't there someone in Germany that sells the Dark Sword miniatures? I'm just going to leave extra water in there for now, because we will be going back to this brush for the next layers. And as I'm sure you've heard me whine before, so we'll do a little check on the paint. I still feel like this is drying pretty fast. I mean, yeah, I'm pulling that paint out, but I don't feel like on my usual parchment paper that it would already be dry. But one day I'll do the great dry brush test and we'll discover. For sure. I have to try to come up with my testing parameters. because I want to do, paint that's spread out like that, paint that's just in a little drop. I think it might be worth, white paints with white, like lighter color paints, seem to thicken up a little faster, so maybe do at least 2 different colors. Possibly do different brands of paint. But there's going to be a limit to how much I can fit on. In some cases, I think I'm going to, like, for this palette, I would cut this paper in half and test its paper, and then test standard parchment paper. And I want to do that with the exemplar palette as well, so that I'm testing the sponge as much as the paper. Since at least in the case of the exemplar, I think the sponge is the secret sauce, but I could be wrong. I do not know why the camera's being boogery about camera focusing again. If we try plain white piece of paper, does it like that better? Absolutely not. Makes the color go all wonky. Right. Well, my apologies if it's going in and out of focus, because I do not know why some days it loves me and some days it doesn't. Because I'd like to be able to hold it closer to my face and be able to see what's happening, but I don't know that that's going to happen. Oops, see, now there, it was more important that I get more of the paint off, even though I'm not a scrubber when I dry brush. I'm more of a dusting the artifact kind of painter, but it seems a little more sensitive to the unloading than the round style or soft bristle. I think the softness is part of what makes those makeup style brushes work, but the shortness of the bristle is also important. Comparative shortness. We want him to have nice butt scales, right? Why does he have a butt? I don't know. It's a snake butt. Actually, I really like the pose of these guys. The sinuous. It's very visually interesting. I should have brought over the other guy from the pack. His pose is a little different. And mainly, I chose this one because it was more open. I try to be, with my class minis, I try to be pretty careful about making, picking miniatures that are easier to paint than not. So that aren't holding their hands in front of their face or have a, if you're working on the skin and the face, it's like, well, sometimes they'll get that mini with the lock of hair that hangs over one eye or something else that makes it more challenging to paint the face or whatever part it is for the class. All right, it's only fair that I also wash this brush out now and then from all the goop. Kinko says, I don't know, ordering from Europe is a total gamble right now. A friend just paid £45 duty on an £80 order. Holy crap. That's a bit mental. From Italy. Italy is actually a place that I feel much less comfortable sending to and from. I will, but if I really want the thing, but I don't. I've heard so many stories about their post office that are really not confidence inspiring. I got a little bit more on this paper towel. Just trying to make sure that this brush is actually doesn't have too much water in it before I go back in, because that's another way to mess up dry brushing. And then with these ones, I find it more important than the round ones to get it off the end. Like, you can see how much paint is still on the end, even if you're going from the side and it seems fine. You want to tamp that little, even a round brush, it's good to tamp that little end off, because it will, you know, depending on how you have to orient your brush, you might end up getting that, having to use that part, and then it's got way more paint than you realize, and you're scrubbing harder than you need to, and you lose all your nice wash. He's got little scales on the back of his hand that I'm not sure I noticed on the other guy. Let's take a look. Maybe. I think I got the bicep too. Alright, so again, I want to wash up my brush so it's not the paint dry in it. So I actually, I'm just dipping these brushes in the water until they're dripping, and then putting them off to the side so that the paint's not going to completely dry up while I'm messing around, switching between brushes and stuff. I guess the downside of that is I may be causing some pigment migration into the ferrule, but such is life. So here is the Rosemary Brush, and here is the Filbert. And I don't see a huge difference. I don't know that I was expecting to see a huge difference. I think I got to paint this one a little faster. And, well, I think it seems like a little more paint was deposited on the scales. If I had to say, I think there was a more even application of the paint over the surface of the scales with the purpose-made dry brush. Now I could continue working on this one. Maybe I should put just a little more on, because this is kind of going to be the this stage we're reestablishing the mid-tone. So this is going to be the color that I want to be over the largest area of the miniature. I'm just trying to leave that dark part in the crevices in between the scales. So this is where I want to make sure that I did apply a decent coating, or I'm going to get places where if then I apply more of the highlighting, it's going to look weird. Because it should be, you know, the highlighting should be on top of the middle color. So there should be more middle color. So I will just try to establish a little more, at least on the parts we see the most. So I'm not going to worry about, you know, inside the inner curve of the tail that really you can't see unless you turn him like this. I'm not going to worry too much about that. But I don't feel like his biceps got enough of the color with this brush either. I am pretty sure I didn't do the hands on the other one. Let's check. I guess it's comforting to know I do this with all styles of painting. Doesn't matter whether it's dry brushing or what, I will forget parts. Alright, so my second color, and what I can't remember, I should have gone to watch my own class, I guess. I cannot remember if I made a mix in between. Let's put it out and see what I think. So I love Saffron Sunset. I like to, I very rarely use it on its own, but it has numerous purposes that I like it for. I feel like I do want an intermediary mix. So I'm looking at those two. And I'm wondering, because I feel like I wouldn't have made a class where they had to do too much. So we're going to go straight in, because one of the reasons I love Saffron Sunset, and it's, I know everybody hates transparent paint, except for stuff like this, one of the reasons I'm not mixing is that essentially we're going to visually mix. We're going to put a somewhat transparent color over that orange, so some of the orange is still going to be showing through. And this would be equally true if I were painting with layering or side brushing or whatever kind of thing. Other thing I've shown you guys. Like, I love that color for red hair. That's kind of, I would use this combo. I would use Numenera Rust or Rust Brown and Saffron Sunset to paint, like if I want a really fiery redhead. That is totally a color combo that I have and would use again. And maybe I'll try to do it in an unobtrusive place, so if I am wrong and this is too light of a color, I can fix it before it does too much damage. So just go pretty lightly here. Yeah, I think it's gonna work fine. I pressed too hard, so you can totally do that with this brush too. There's something about those back scales that is just harder to stay out of the crevices on. And you will find that with sculpts. I mean, that's one of the tough things with washes is sometimes you put the wash on and it just does not, you know, it flow because of the nature of where the crevices are in the figure. It just flows off somewhere else, and you can't get the parts dark that you really want to be dark, which is why sometimes, you know, it's useful to know a few other techniques. I might be applying this a little too broadly. This is the highlight color. I don't necessarily want it everywhere. So before I started today, I painted, in the class we did these scales a different way. So that was actually already painted. But I painted a little bit of the grass on the base, and then the non-metallic, or the metallic areas I am planning to paint a metallic. I wanted to make sure there was a coat of paint on there. There is some nice sculpted detail both on the shield and the sword. It's not quite as apparent on the sword. This is probably one of those ones where it suffered a little in the translation to bones process. This is original bones. So some of the detail that, if there is a metal version of this, some of the detail that metal version would have is not on this figure, but there is still quite a lot of nice detail on the sword. I mean, on the shield. So I want to put, I don't want to put on a lot of coats of metallic if I can avoid it. So I wanted to start with the darker foundation for those areas, in hopes of just having to do one or two coats of the metallic. And also, when I did the airbrushing, I didn't get paint on everything, and I find that classic bones takes a while to dry, especially if you're on stream and you want it to happen faster because people are waiting for you. Or if you're in a convention and you want it to happen faster because people are waiting for you, then it will really take a long time to dry. So I thought, well, why not just get a coat of paint on those now, and that will help. So yeah, that rust plus the saffron sunset is a pretty nice combo for a color. And now we can compare with the additional. So that's the benefit of doing at least one step of highlighting, and we're going to do one more. But now I'm going to switch to the other brush and do the saffron sunset. I'll just have to be a little more careful with the last color becomes more opaque because it has more white in it, so that's going to be a little tougher to use judiciously than the saffron sunset. I'm surprised we haven't had a cat barge in today, if not two. They're not very happy with us right now. It is very warm today. We had a heat warning, so we decided that we could not leave the porch door open. It would stress the air conditioner out too much. So the cats that would prefer to be out baking in the heat because they think it's groovy are trapped here with us in the air conditioner. And feelings are being had. If you go near that door, they just kind of gather there looking piteous. They're so unused to being denied everything they want that they cannot understand what is happening. I forgot the back of this guy's hand again. Yep. Yes, the very scientific method of testing dry brushes. Not that I'm recommending any of you put paint on yourselves or lick your brush. You notice you never see me lick my brush. I won't say I've never formed the bristles, but since I've got the sponge now, it pretty much I can do all of that without ingesting paint and old gunky paint water and whatever lives on my old palette. Wouldn't have been very good to ingest probably. I did test this new palette in the sense of I just left everything exactly the same way it was from last week after I rinsed out the palette paper, and it did not go funky, so there is at least that. Although I do think they recommend putting some copper in if you are worried about the funk, which I probably should do, because I think it's best to just avoid getting the funk in the first place. Because I think that's what happened with my other palette. I just can't seem to not. Yeah, I bleached it and all kinds of stuff, but I just can't seem to not have some funk. All right. I don't think I want to go to this super tiny brush for this part, but I do want to make sure that I don't apply too much of this, and maybe I'll even thin a little bit down, because, well, actually that doesn't look like it's too opaque, but paints with white in them always do seem to have this problem. And that's the trick when I use this combo for painting hair as well. Whatever I use for the brightest highlights on the hair is almost always more opaque than that Saffron Sunset, and I have to be really careful to not make a bunch of streaky looking marks. In an ideal world, I probably would have used some brush on sealer to mix with that so that the consistency wouldn't get more watery. So I'm definitely going to be doing the self-test now, because this isn't such a light color that I can't see it at all on the paper towel, but can I see whether it's refined to the point that I want it to be is a different question. So I'm also using a super light hand until I know, how does it seem like the paint is going to come off of here. And it does not seem too dire. So that is good. And I'm gonna focus on high points and points that are receiving the light, which is maybe technically not what someone who was newer to painting would be doing, but I don't want to end up with this super light color everywhere. hard to get those little scales on the side of his neck. And in there. So we'll do the comparison. So just taking that little bit of extra time, which because it's not applied over a very large area, really isn't a lot of time, really does add some pop, even to the most basic approach. And do I want to go down to a smaller brush here as well? Perhaps I do. So I will go down to my Reaper 4, my non-bristles everywhere Reaper 4. To be fair, the bristles everywhere one is it's almost as long as I've been painting have I had that brush, so it's served its duty. The fact that it still works at all is actually pretty impressive. Francis is here and like the similar lesson during ReaperCon Online. It's so beautiful. Thank you, Francis. So what happened is these are actually left over from that. If you recall, I was kind of doing the cooking show thing where I would just like show how to do the wash, but then go get one that had the wash finished and stuff. So I had these, and I'm wanting to do some shows where we talk about what kind of things do you start looking at as you're trying to improve your painting. Especially if you're someone who, you're coming to the MSP Open and you sort of want some ideas of common problems that we see in advance. And then I'll probably have these at the MSP Open to kind of show people. So today I'm sort of trying to paint them the way someone who's newer to painting or just trying to bang out a lot of army figures or whatever would paint them. If you remember the class, there's a step that I didn't do here that we did in class that is something when we come back, maybe next week, probably next week, unless something compelling comes up. And I do okay, here's what's wrong with it and how I would improve it. We will do that thing that we did in class. Even though it's kind of backtracking, but I think it should still be fine. So that is with the gold NMM highlight color. I'll show the 3 colors here. Actually, I will also, since I don't have a little swatch on my bottle yet of the Ready Leather because it's in the bottle, I'll just go ahead and dispense some on here so you can kind of see the colors that I used. I don't want to go to pure white, I don't think. I think it would have the effect of dulling stuff down instead of adding a little more pop with this particular color scheme. There are definitely colors where I would do a little pure white. So this is the Ready Leather, and then it was thinned out to kind of wash consistency. So that is the scales, but I also kind of want to get going on their, well, actually, we need to do their breastplate scales. I did that a particular way in the class that I don't know if it's what I would want to do now. But I will use that Ready Leather. So I think I'm just going to dry brush up from here. This isn't the darkest color that is humanly possible, but it's pretty dark. But I am going to fix the parts where I got dry brush colors on the belly scales. I guess I could try doing a black wash over this. Why not? I'm just going along the edges because I don't think I messed up so dramatically as to get color in the middle of this area of scales. is he in focus? Who knows? So I don't know if anyone came up with any additional ReaperCon or MSP open questions from last week. I did go on the forums and respond to that question that the Dogfather had, and then that raised more questions, so I got a hold of Michael and got clarifications from him. So if you read the post after I first replied, go back and read it again, because I edited in Michael's information that he gave me, because Michael is nicer than I am. So he would work to figure out a way that you could enter just one of the manufacturer contests, including, Reaper Mousling or Big Monster or whatever, but not be in the main MSP Open. But that thread also reminded you of something that I'm going to go ahead and mention here, so that, in case any of you didn't know, or in case you're on Discord or the Facebook group or wherever, and you encounter someone who's doing this, because we don't think it's a great idea. So last year we had people who they put in one figure as an entry, and then they just had a couple other figures for display only. So for display only means we will not look at them to judge them. You're just showing them to people. Most often people do it if they have a commission painting service and they want to show their painting. But let's say you had a fairly fragile miniature and you didn't want to have to carry it around the con all day to show it to your friends. You could put that next to your display as display only. It's not done yet. Say you're working on it for next year. You didn't quite get it done for this year. And the reason they did that, because the people who were the people who take your miniatures in and help you enter all the computer information and stuff, they try to be as helpful as possible. And they were saying, are you sure you want to do that? Because you're giving the judges fewer choices. Like, maybe one of these other things is better than you think it is, and the judge would, give you a better score than they would on the one that you picked. And they were doing this because they wanted the feedback on that miniature. So they had a miniature that they really wanted feedback on. So they wanted to make sure that one got judged. The issue is, and what we would like people to be aware of, is you don't have to, those two things don't have to be connected. The miniature that we choose to judge has nothing to do with what you get feedback on. You can come to your judge and ask about your specific miniature that was judged, or you can ask about something you didn't even put in the contest. And if anything, I would actually say, why wait until after the contest? We're all starting to get tired. There's giant lines for, a lot of the judges. Get your feedback in advance. Talk to us Thursday and Friday. Maybe you're not going to get the person who's your exact judge. But I would say the majority of the time, especially if you're talking about a metal placement that's below a high silver, you pick any 3 people off Artist Alley, and they're going to come up with pretty similar things as your 3 judges would. Like, each person may not mention the same issue, but if you have 3 judges and 3 people that you've just picked out of Artist Alley, chances are you're going to get the same comments and the same suggestions. And it is worth talking to multiple people, because different people explain things different ways. So you might find you grok the way Michael explains how to do something with metallics and not the way I do it, because I would explain it weird. So it definitely is good to talk to multiple people. Those people don't have to be your exact judges. Anyone on Artist Alley is going to be at least somewhat familiar and adept with giving feedback. Admittedly, like, people who haven't been teaching as long, they may not be as clear, or they may have to look a little longer or something. But that's part of what we're there for. And I think everyone's lives would be better if they didn't focus too much on, those exact judges. The whole system is set up to be so it's like individual feelings shouldn't make that big a difference. I'm going to do... I have trouble believing a black wash would do anything. We're not going to do the black wash. It would just take time. But I need that ready leather back. Or do I want to use this one? Yeah, I'll do the regular. So hopefully that made sense. Because, I mean, I don't want people to do the thing where they're just entering one miniature, but I want everyone to be aware that you can just get feedback in advance, because you can get feedback in advance. Really, the only reason you would need to talk to your specific judges is if something seems really wonky to you, or you get I mean, you can look at the actual scores, and you see that one person scored your miniature higher than the other two, so you might be like, okay, well, what did I do that you like so much, so I can do more of that. That kind of thing. Wow, that yellow paint really doesn't seem like it wants to come out of my brush. Because I would definitely like to have light colored paint off before I go back to much darker colors. Frances was excited to see the miniature they painted during the ReaperCon Expo turn out so well. I'm glad you like that one. And I can't remember if it was you. Somebody asked me after what color would I paint the armor, and that was the other reason I wanted to go back to these, is because there's kind of a couple of different answers you could give to that. I've lost my dry brush cloth. But to do the comparison thing, I'm going to end up painting both of these the same, but I might mess with some stuff when we do the edits. So because of how these scales are constructed, I need to try to be going from top to bottom. Like if I'm going in this direction, I'm going to be getting color on an edge that is facing down and should be a shadow, if that makes sense. So if you think about, plates like this, well, think of my fingers as being like armor plates or these belly plates or anything like that, and imagine that they are one set out from the other. If I want this line to look dark, I don't want to come up from the bottom, or I'm going to be getting stuff up on the lower edge. I want to come from the top as much as I can. Now, what I might have to do in a few places is go side to side, just because if the angle is too acute, I'm not going to be getting color on anything other than the edge. So I'll be getting it on the top edge, which is where I want it, but not on the plate overall. If that makes sense. And normally I would have painted these areas where I'm going to put the metallics black, since I am going to be using steel type metallics. I did think about copper or bronze. And I brought the paints over so I can show you what the swatches looked like next to it. But even though in theory it seemed like it should be cool, when I actually put the color next to the figure, I don't know if like having yellow in the metallic is just stealing too much thunder from the yellow that's on the figure, maybe. But I didn't like it at any rate, so I'm not doing that way. Yeah, trying to get some of this paint on more of the middle of the scales is a fun challenge, but we'll call this good enough. Oh, hi, darling Creepshow. That is very kind of you to say that you adore me and my work. Is this your first time coming to the stream? If so, welcome. And if anyone else out there, lurking or otherwise, is fresh to the stream, we're happy to have you. And I'm open to questions. Wendy is open to providing links when I mention random things. So between the two of us, we generally get you covered. With these figures that I'm working on, Darling Creepshow normally lurks right now, in case, because people do seem to come in the middle sometimes. I'm trying a different brush on each one. So I did the dry brush style, makeup style brush on that one, and I'm going to use the traditional flat on this guy. Will it make a difference? When I did test previously, there were some differences. I suspect the big difference really is more time. I feel like the flat style brush takes more time because you have to stop and reload a lot more often. We'll stop and reload and then unload because that's how dry brushing works. So it's the unloading, it's the running out of paint and unloading that makes it take longer, I think. Where those other big bushy brushes hold a ton of paint. Now what I get here in exchange is I can get in that area that I was having trouble getting into with the big fat round brush. I can get in there a lot easier with this flat brush, even though it's, you know, not the world's freshest flat brush. It's not the crazy hairs all over brush. It's not the bedhead brush. And I'm trying to figure out one show. I think if I get a thermos or something, I can show you how you can kind of improve crazy bedhead brush. Or ones that have gone like super hooky. You can never make them like nice perfect point like the day you bought them, but you can bring them back a lot more than you think you can. I was very surprised when I discovered how well some of those work, which is why I still have that, you know, somewhat bedhead brush because it had gotten to a really bad state. And then when I heard from the Winsor Newton rep that comes to my art store that you can put the bristles in hot water and it will often bring the shape back. Because I'd always been told, like, never use really hot water on your brush. It's going to loosen the glue, make the hairs fall out. So I was always really careful about, you know, when I was filling from the taps, I would make sure I had the cold water going, or like both the hot and cold, so it was just tepid. And I still would probably not use very hot water on a real hair brush. But if you're talking about a synthetic that you were going to junk anyway, it's certainly worth a try. And I did not have any hairs fall out when I did that. So it worked fine. Darling Creep Show has a set of Citadel dry brushes and they seem to get trashed really quickly. If you scrub a lot, that is worse too. There is some variation by the brush, but how we treat them makes a difference too. I'm going to get one that is dry just to demonstrate what I mean. So, you know, some people dry brush like this. So their brush is really dry and they're using a vigorous scrubbing motion. That's going to junk up a brush really quickly. There's no, like, that's not a bad brush. You're doing a thing that is very injurious to brushes. I prefer to do more of a dusting type motion. So I'm moving across the tops of the texture, but I'm letting the texture pull the paint off the brush as much as I am using the brush to deposit the paint, if that makes sense. So you still have to get excess paint off and whatnot, but it's less damaging to a brush. You'll be able to keep the brush head a bit better longer. You may get different effects the other way. You know, it's definitely worth experimenting with. You get different texture effects because if you go read the texture article that I have up right now, absolutely experiment with brushes and do different things. For anyone who was here when I was testing all the dry brushes, this is just like 2 of the types that I tested in over 3 different shows, I think. There were some times when there were very different results depending on the brush. And then there were other times where they were like when we did the stone wall, that was the last one I did, I think. Overall, they were pretty similar, but there was kind of like a textural thing that happened that was really interesting, I thought, with the different brushes, where it'd be worth doing that to then think about, you know, well, which kind of texture do I want for which thing? Or to have different types of stone on, you know, if you have multiple pieces of terrain, you could have different types of stone. Since I'm painting this a different way than I did in that original class. In the original class, we just used the same colors for both things. But I think I want to mix it up a little. So I'm gonna mix my own highlight with the Ready Leather and then Rich Leather, which I think, well, I don't know, I don't entirely love it, but we'll see what happens. F. Francis, I always get paint up in the ferrule area and then my brushes splay out. Can brush soaps solve that? Brush soaps can definitely help. The best idea is to not get a lot of paint up there. With dry brushing, I mean, that's going to be hard not to do. I'm going to spend a lot more time cleaning these brushes at the end of today's session than I would if I'd been painting, layering with my fancy sable brushes, because those, you know, I'm able to paint in such a way that I don't get a lot of paint up in the ferrule. Brush soaps help. I really like this one, the Masters Cleaner and Brush Restorer. You will probably need to like kind of, you get it, it helps if you get it wet first. So I'll usually get a big brush and just kind of rub it on there. And then you rub your brush in, and I scrub it on my sponge because that's nice and soft. I figure you can do it just in the palm of your hand is also a nice soft way, but eventually, depending on how many brushes you're cleaning, that can become uncomfortable for your hand. And then when you dry it, pinch. And then check where you pinch. You see where that fold is? If you still have color up in the ferrule, you will probably see a little light trace of color. And then I just do the whole thing again and again and again. And if I have to, you know, if I'm working on a bunch, I'll get one wet and hope that the brush soap is getting up into the ferrule. Winsor & Newton makes a liquid brush cleaner. I used to use it a lot. I used to, like, I would dip my brushes in that and then use the Masters. I'm not convinced that was working any better, but if you have stuff that's really up in the ferrule, that's probably what you want to do. You want to figure out a way to suspend your brush. So, like, you know, you got a little cup, say, of the stuff. If you can just use not a paper clip, like a butterfly clip or something, so that the bristles aren't actually touching the bottom of your cup, but it's just kind of hanging in and it's about up to here or so. Leave it in there for a little while. That will hopefully break up anything dried and chunky that's actually up under the ferrule. Then you do the boiling water thing, and that should help restore the shape. So once you get the gunk out, you might still have to do the boiling water part because, you know, the bristles have been misplaced and they need to be encouraged to go back. I think the boiling water thing works because I think the brush hairs are kind of like, you know, Bones Classic miniatures. They're sort of like a memory plastic. So the hot water will make them want to go back to the original shape. Yeah, you need brush cleaner, Francis. Rinsing will not get everything out. I clean dry brushes after every, like this, I would clean these after every use because there's no way that paint is not getting in there. And I find like these kinds of brushes or the flats, like it's harder to get the paint out of there than it is like a long, thin round. Rinsing gets paint better out of this shaped brush than it does out of this shaped brush. And I don't have my little gizmo out now, but there is something called a paint puck that you can get and put at the bottom of your water cup. And it's got little silicone nubs. And those help agitate the soap. Well, agitate the paint out of your brush and agitate the soap into your brush when you're cleaning. Hopefully that made sense. Okay. I'm trying to remember which guy I was using which brush on. It was the one that had the color on it. Anne had a show very recently where she was actually cleaning the ferrule of a brush. The Winsor & Newton cleaner is what she was using, and it was pretty near to miraculous. I was really surprised with one of the things that sold me on the Masters is I've done paint and takes, and if you want to see brushes put through the ringer, that's where it happens. People are leaving them in the water with the bristle down, and you don't always catch them fast enough, or they'll just leave paint on it and get up and walk away when they're done, and you, if you don't grab it soon enough, then that paint's dried on there. So that happened repeatedly, that there would be, actual, like they just dipped it in paint and then left. Like the whole brush head was covered in paint. And I was able to get those back repeatedly, and then use the hot water trick to try to keep the shape of the brush at least usable. Because brushes are the hardest thing to get for paint and take. Like Reaper doesn't make their own brushes. Everybody has to kind of order brushes from somewhere. So it costs a company a lot to donate those, and the companies that do make brushes probably don't care about miniature paint and takes. So I was always very parsimonious with the brush. I'm like, I don't want to have to go buy a bunch of brushes for this. Now I've seen some packs on Amazon, and we could replace them more easily than when we first started doing this, and it was harder to get stuff, bulk things from China. Oh wait, I'm using the wrong brush on that guy. But I was really impressed that I could clean out like just actual literal gunked on paint. Is it bad to try to comb the bristles with a fingernail while rinsing to try to get the stuff out, or is that bad? I mean, I would start with your, with your hand or the little silicone thing. Let me see if I can get that silicone thing, because I think I have a spare one. So this is the paint puck. And I find that these side things work pretty well for our style of brushes. Like these are really, I think, for bigger. You start going up to this size brush, this makes more sense. But for our little brushes, I find that these parallel lines work pretty well. I mean, if as long as you're pulling down, I don't think it'd be terrible. But you would want to be working with the shape of the brush. And I would try, if you haven't tried cleaners, try cleaners before you do that, because you'll be surprised at how much it gets out. I have been meaning, I have some brushes that have had unfortunate lives, and I've been meaning to take some of those one day and just show you guys some stuff, or, just even some of the old paint and take brushes that are now not even good for that. I'll just coat a couple of them in paint, and we'll see if we can get it off. Don't think I still have any of the Winsor Newton. I'll have to have a look around. I think I ran out of it and I just didn't buy any more, but I have thought about it because, I mean, yeah, liquid's very likely gonna get up in the ferrule better, but I've had such impressive results with the Masters. There's another one called Pink Soap, I think, and I actually know nothing about that one. I know there are people who use it, and that is what it is meant for, but I've never tried that one myself. But yeah, do a cleaner. You will be surprised at how much will come out. In fact, we're at time. I'll just finish highlighting the rest of the belly scales on my own because, it's dry brushing. I think you've seen from the first two stages how it'll work. I'll just be using a lighter hand. And I'll take this brush that I have right now. So there you see I'm pressing down and I still get some stuff on the ferrule. So let's try to rinse this out until I'm not seeing that. Still just a little. I normally have a little dish about this size that I put the paint puck in. And I use it for cleaning the brushes. So I use it to, I'll put the soap on and then I'll use this thing to rinse it off. Like it's a ramekin or one of those prep dishes you would use for cooking. But because it's kind of like a small open dish of water, I don't like to have it out while I'm streaming and there's all the computer equipment and stuff. So I don't have that this time. But if I do a brush cleaning episode, I will have that. I think the brown that's left now is actually my rinse water is kind of brown. So we'll say this is, you know, done. And I did not moisten this first, which I should have done. But we'll try to get it moist enough. And usually you'll just start seeing color come out even at this stage. Like you'd be like, oh, look at all that color coming out of it already. And then I would use this because it's nice and soft. And I don't like the way it feels on my hand when I do it too much. And then again, I'm working with the shape of the brush. So you see I'm pulling back so that I'm not pushing the hairs around. It's maintaining the shape of the brush. And it's hard to tell because it's a blue sponge, but I can see red stuff coming out of there. Let's see if it will show up. So that reddy brown paint is absolutely still in here. And then if I do the pinch test, it doesn't quite pass the pinch test. There was a little bit on that side. So I would know to do it again. And I'll keep using this same spot on the sponge. Like I'll usually, if I'm not cleaning because of dry brushing, I will, and you see I'm trying to get it so it's right at the bottom of the brush too. I'll keep using the spot. It'll build up soap, and I'll start with my biggest brushes and then work down on my smallest brushes because then the soap's just sort of already there. And I don't have to worry about mashing them around in the little container. Well, and then technically what I would be doing is, so I had all my soap. I would scrub it a bit on this so that I have a separate dish of water with that to try to get, get the soap up in places. Then I would rinse off with actual clean rinse water, which is not what I have right now. And then do my pinch test. And that, I think, actually was just the spot that I was on already had brown. And now there's no brown. So that's what I do with my brushes. But I don't do that every session with every brush. So if I know I've done something like dry brushing, yes, I'm going to clean the brush after. If I thought I slipped and got some paint up in the ferrule, or I was using a lot of washes and glazes, maybe I'd wash those brushes. But like my really nice brushes, I don't wash them every time. If there's a time when I sit down and I'm having to wash some other brushes, then I'll wash them. I used to wash them a lot more, and I think I was just putting wear and tear on them. But maybe Anne washes more, and that's why her brushes wear out the good way. Her brushes wear out by getting thinner and thinner, but still remaining very pointy. And my brushes seem to wear out by losing the point. At which point I can use them for side brushing or some other stuff, but I can't really use them as good brushes anymore. And then eventually a sable brush, no matter how well taken care of, if you're using it a lot, eventually the bristles just get too soft. Like they're just too floppy. They don't. Part of what you like in a sable brush is the snap, which is how easily it goes back to its original shape. And bad brushes or brushes that have been worn out, you can even kind of get them to. I think I have a few actually, because I think that's why I put these off to the side because they're worn off. But I'm gonna have to zoom way in because these are small size brushes. I'm gonna get it wet. And it just doesn't, you see how it doesn't bounce back the way that other one showed. Eventually, it's even kind of U-curved. So see how slow it's taking to come back from that U? That means there's no snap left in that brush. Whereas if I get this brush, let's see what happens. And the hairs snap back right away. Or close to right away. I mean, this isn't my best brush either. How about you? Yeah, you're good. Good new brush. It's a bit bigger than the others, but... So that's what they call snap. That's what they mean by snap in a brush. There's no way to keep... I mean, if you're using a brush and it gets soft because you're using it, you've worn it out. It did what it was supposed to do. It lived a good life and served you well. So hopefully that helps a little with the brushes. I will try to remember to do a more in-depth brush fixing show, because it's definitely something that affects us all. And I don't know that anyone has all the answers. Recently, I heard that this might have abrasives in it, and somebody had this fancy microscope picture, and I'm like, I kind of want to find out if there's someone in the miniatures community, because we have a lot of sciencey chemistry people like that. If there's someone who has access to that kind of microscope, and they could repeat this experiment, because it just seems wacky. So who knows? Maybe that is what's wearing my brushes out. But I will continue with these probably next week. I didn't get quite as far as I hoped, but that's because we were. Oh right, we got to look at the swatches. We got to look at the dry swatches that I put to safekeeping, I guess. So if anyone came in a bit later, these are swatches of the new MSP colors, I believe is what Quindy said they're called, that are in the Pledge Manager of the Reaper Kickstarter. So I went through, if you want to watch the video on demand, I went through each of the colors and I talked about possible ways you could use them. The top shows you the color like at full thickness out of the bottle, and then the bottom is, I thin it down so you can see what we call the undertone. So you can see this might look black on initial glance, but it's got a little bit of blue in it. And this was, we like this one. Michael and I worked probably the hardest on those two. So, and if you're in the Pledge Manager right now, the painter's picks, there's two sets of paint that are in the Kickstarter. So one of them is the painter's picks, which is this one, and these paints are already in the line. So double check with these. You may already own some of these. If you don't have a ton of paints, or you want to have some backup paint, or you want to give paint to a friend, these are a really good price in the Kickstarter. So these I had swatched out even before the Kickstarter was finished. But right now there is already like a paragraphs of description for each color, if you look on the Pledge Manager, that gives you some ideas for how you could use it. And then I have written, but Ron hasn't had a chance to put up yet, the same thing for these. So even if you look right now, there's not going to be the whole suggestion thing, but there will be suggested uses for these colors, and I talked about some of those earlier in the video. Even if you go back and watch the video, you might still want to look at the descriptions on the Kickstarter thing, because I guarantee that I forgot stuff while I was swatching out the colors and hanging out and talking with you all. Let me check if there's anything in chat. People are wrangling all sorts of creatures: goblins, kobolds, jackalopes. I can barely wrangle cats, so I'm not going to volunteer for any of that. Grey Mouser ordered some of the paints already. Only had one of... Oh, that's good that you only had one of the painter's picks. I actually never finished that. I was telling people earlier in the stream that it was hard to pick the painter's picks. Not because there aren't colors we don't like or whatever, but one of the parameters we tried to set was not having been in a previous Kickstarter, and so there's everyone since the first one, there's been the same kind of thing where here's a set of colors that already exist, and then here's a set of new colors. So if you that was like 3 or 4 previous ones that those colors were already taken, and Anne's pretty good at knowing what paints are useful, so she'd already nabbed some, because I think last year was Anne's favorites. So she'd already nabbed a bunch of the colors that because people would give me their choices, and I'd be like, nope, it's already been used, keep coming up with something. Because I would have put that Saffron Sunset in, but Saffron Sunset's already been in. We all would have put Blue Liner in, but I think Blue Liner's already been in. So that was the origin of the painter's picks, and also how I got the descriptions. Thanks everyone for coming. I hope you had a good time. Sorry, I was trying to catch up on chat again. Francis was asking about, are these additional colors that weren't in the main Kickstarter offering? No, both of these sets of colors were in the main Kickstarter unlocked early on. There's no other paints that have been added to my knowledge. That's not typically something that they add later in the pledge manager. I think they called them power-ups last time. So I imagine there will be power-ups of miniatures, but I don't expect that there will be any additional paints. If there are, I will try to get the intel for you on what colors there are. Whoop. But thank you all for coming. I'm sure that Queenie's going to find us a raid so you can continue watching fun stuff, and I'll see you next week for more fun with snakes. Bye, everybody. Oh, wrong one.